Okay, so this is my Doodle Jump Game demo. The milestones that I have completed are 1, 2, 3, 4A, 4C, 5A, 5E, 5G, and 5I. So this game has realistic physics, so as the player's score increases, the game becomes faster. There's dynamic on-screen notifications that display awesome power and wow. There are lethal creatures which are colored in blue, and if the player touches them, then they lose the game. And there's also a losing screen which says you lose, and there's an arrow pointing to S, much like this one, and it also displays the score. And the doodler can also shoot plasma, and if the plasma hits an enemy, then the player gets 3 points. So I'll give you a demo now. Okay, so as you can see, the doodler can move up and down and left and right. And when the doodler is moving up, the enemies move towards the right. And when the doodler is moving down, the enemies move towards the left. And if you hit an enemy, then you lose the game and go to this losing screen, which says you lose, and it indicates to press S to reset the game. And there's also a score that displays at the top. And you can also move the doodler left and right in the screen as well and shoot. So if we press S, then we can reset the game. And for every platform that you land on, you get 1 point. And every 5 points, a on-screen notification will be displayed that says wow, power, or awesome. And the word that will be displayed will be random based on a random number. So if we press L, we can shoot an enemy, and if we shoot an enemy, we get 3 points. And the player can also scroll the screen from left to right as well. So as you can see, this time it displayed power when we got to 5 points. This time it displayed wow. And power again. There is always 11 platforms on the screen at all times and 3 enemies. So that is the demo of this game. And one more thing is that the game speeds up as the points increase. So I'll comment out this code to give me 50 points initially, so we can see the difference. So as you can see, the game is much faster now, and the player is jumping much faster, and the enemies are also moving faster. Once we reach 100 points, then the game will be really fast, but it won't get any faster, because we're doing this by reducing the sleep time by 1 millisecond for every point that we get. So I'll give you a rundown of the code now. So here we are initializing 12 platforms, and we use a for loop to draw all the platforms by calling this draw method. And the same thing with the enemies, except there's only 3 enemies and these are their initial locations. And then we have this main while loop which checks for the keyboard and displays the screen, displays the score, and also scrolls the screen. And it also checks to see if a platform is about to go below this last row, then it's going to make it appear at the top. So these are the methods for deleting and drawing an enemy. And this method generates a random number to decide which message to display. And based on this random number that's generated, we display the word that's associated with these numbers. So 0 is for awesome, 1 is for poggers, 2 is for wow. And again, based on the random numbers, we delete the message that was just displayed. So this function sleeps the program, and for every point that we get, we decrease the sleep time by 4. So the sleep time is given by this equation, which is 100 minus the score. After 100 points, the game will not speed up because we can't have negative sleep time. This method clears the top right corner to display the score, and this method displays the score by dividing the number by 10 to get the last digit. And it does that for each place value. And these are for displaying the numbers. So this method draws the platform and deletes the platform. This off-screen checker basically checks to see if there's red color in this last row. If there is red color, that means a platform is in this last row, and it's going to respawn a new platform up here based on a random number. And if there's blue color, it means that there's an enemy, and it's going to respawn a new enemy based on a random number up here. So at all times we have 12 platforms and 3 enemies on the screen. And if there's green, that means the player has fallen below the screen and the game ends, because that's an invalid zone. So this clears the screen once the game ends, so we can display the losing screen. And after that, we can display the losing screen, and these are just this is just code to display the letters. So we scroll the screen every time the player jumps up. So when the player jumps up, we're going to scroll the screen by looking at which direction the player is jumping in. So V1 stores the direction that the player is jumping in, and it only scrolls when the player is moving up. So when we scroll, we move all the platforms down, and we move all the enemies down by 1 row. And we also move the enemies horizontally depending on whether or not the player is jumping up or down. So if the player jumps up, then we move the enemies to the right, and if the player jumps down, then the enemies move to the left. And this method checks if the player has touched the enemy, and if the enemy is touched, then the game ends. So this method basically checks if the enemy is hit by the plasma, and if the enemy is hit by the plasma, then we give 3 points to the player. This method draws the plasma and deletes the plasma. This method allows the player to shoot the plasma right above the top of the sprite for the player. This method makes the player jump up by a set height, which is in register S0. So the player jumps up, and once the counter reaches 0, then the player starts moving back down. And once the player hits a platform, then it's going to stop moving down. So if the player hits a platform, that means the color right below the player will be equal to red, which is stored in register T1, and we stop moving down. And we also increase the score count by 1 once we hit the platform. So these are just methods to display the letters, and this generates a random number for the start address. And this takes in keyboard input J, K, and L, and S for resetting